Hello, welcome to another Whose Views Chit Chat, and you've caught me in the middle of chatting along to my mate here, John. Hello.
Oh yeah, how you doing?
Really good, really good. Thank you for coming on to Chit Chat.
That's all right. It's really hot here in Bournemouth today, so if you've seen my head is bright red, it's like a second sun at the moment. So,
Well, I'm not going to say anything about that, John. So yeah, Chit Chat on Whose Views is all about us getting the opportunity to just have a general chat about Doctor Who and other things with fellow fans. And as you can see, John is here today as a fellow Who viewer. You know, when did you first get into Doctor Who?
I got into Doctor Who in the early 80s. My dad worked for the BBC, so they sat me in front of it one day, and that would have been my earliest memories were Davison. And I got into it, and I think they thought, oh, he'll grow out of it eventually. Got to 20.
I think they all did.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But it was great. I was like the cool kid at school because, oh, your dad works for the BBC. Oh, yeah, you're going behind the scenes and seeing Doctor Who, and oh, great. Yeah. So that was my fun childhood. Yeah. Which was fantastic.
Did you get you into television centres to see behind the scenes of Doctor Who?
I got into a few. It got trickier as it went on, but you might remember it. But the main things it got me into was like the Really Wild Show.
Oh yeah, the Really Wild Show. Yeah.
So Terry Nutkins and whatnot. So that was great fun. But you know, and then he'd surprise me every now and again. Like when we moved to Bournemouth and he went to Southampton BBC. He goes, "Come with me," and he took me out one night, and it was the Doctor Who convention at Bournemouth College.
All right.
So Colin Baker was there, Liz Sladen, so he snuck me into that, which was fantastic. So yeah, it's great. So
and that was the first time you got to meet other fans then?
Yeah, so it's great. Early days of having insiders within the BBC, but these days I'm just like everybody else.
Well, yeah. I mean, at that point, yeah, you're right, because the production office start to really sort of clamp down on visiting bodies to the studios, didn't they? So at least you got into, you know, some elements of the BBC at that point, because it really did become a bit more, no, we're not going to let secrets go out, and we can't afford to do this, and we can't afford to do that.
And it was a great time. I mean, I remember Christmas parties at BBC Bristol, and it was in the studio. They had the bouncy castles up and Father Christmas and all that. It was great. Great fun.
Yeah, I'd forgotten they used to do things. Yeah, I'd forgotten they used to do things like that in the car parks and stuff, open to the public, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'd forgotten all that.
Gosh, let me back now.
That's right. Yeah,
I've tried.
I mean, did you? Have you been digging a tunnel to try and get in?
Been down in the car park. Police on the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's it now, isn't it? It's a lot heavier than it was. But yeah. So, are you a merchandise collector as well?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't so much the last few years. I think, but you know, all through my life, I've obviously done the VHS ranges, and I've done the annuals, and I've done the graphic novel collections, and the Target books, and when Who came back, the Millennium Effects like Sonic Screwdriver was fantastic. Still got that, and then just those beautiful when they came out, the gold Dalek remote control Daleks, great. Yeah, A9, yeah, good times. So hopefully in the next few years we might see a bit more of that again.
Would you look at buying stuff then? Would you get back into collecting if it was good stuff?
I think so. And I think I've talked to you a few times about the the B&M?
Yeah. So the character option stuff.
So they've interested me. I haven't got to them yet, but I know they sell out they're like gold dust, aren't they, really? But yeah, I mean, if it's decent, I'm there. headlocking people and pinning them to the ground, jumping over them to get to it.
You never know that. I mean, you remember when the show came back in 2005, and especially in 2006 onwards, there were more shops around, so the distribution for the figures and the toys and everything like that was huge. I mean, I remember seeing them in shops that are now long gone. I mean, there used to be, of course, in Toys R Us and Woolworths and Debenhams, some VHS. I mean, they're all gone now, so it makes you wonder where they're going to put them all now, because there's not many independent toy shops anymore. There's not many big toy shops in Britain anymore. You can't go into a Debenhams anymore. I mean, where would you put them on the high street? I don't know.
Well, exactly that. But it's like, even when it came back, I mean, before that, I mean, obviously wilderness years, I mean, you remember what it's like when you go into WH Smith and it was just you picking up your Doctor Who magazine, that was it. And then there was like the VHS range, you were asking them to get them in and you'd collect them, and that was a great time, and going in and getting your novels. And then when it came back, it was a bit of a fever dream for me. I was like, hang on a minute, there's people coming into the store picking up Doctor Who merchandise. What's going on here? Don't they know this is my corner?
Yeah.
So but hopefully it gets back to what it was, because that was a great time when it was everywhere, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, literally. I mean, you mentioned the wilderness years there. I mean, it was a culture shock when the show came back, and it suddenly was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're saying it was everywhere. I still can't quite get over that, to be honest.
No, and I remember getting to this 96 TV movie, and I was like, oh, please give me a series again. And then that kind of, at the time, no internet, it was kind of leaked out slowly that wasn't going to happen after that backdoor pilot. And then you kind of thought, oh, maybe that's it now for Doctor Who. And then it came back, and I remember watching Road, and I was thinking, please, everyone, like it. And then it just took off, and it was great, and suddenly I was sitting down watching Doctor Who with my nieces, who half the time didn't want anything to do with me anyway, but they're like, oh, he's the cool uncle now, he's a Doctor Who man,
he knows about this thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is strange when you think about it, because you mentioned the wilderness year thing. I don't know about you, John, but I actually look back at the wilderness years now with fondness, because it was just a special time. Okay, we didn't have the main show on air, but there was so much going on if you were a fan and you knew where it was, especially here in the UK where we are. There were conventions going on. There were local group meetings going on. There were novels coming out. The VHSs really took off. I mean, I met so many people back then.
Oh, it was a great time. I also remember sort of going into Borders when Borders was a thing, and
the bookshop.
The bookshop, and you had all that, you had the Eighth Doctor runs and whatnot in there, and I used to just pick one up probably every couple of weeks, smash through them, go back and get more. It was great, but it's all faded, isn't it? Which is a shame, but I'm sure it will get revived and come back again.
Yeah, I mean, fandom is fandom. It's different now, though. Do you know what I mean? The fandom feels different now, and I know, we're all getting older, and you can look at things, but when you compare it to when the show wasn't off air, it has changed.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still remember with it being off air. I remember trying to get my friends into it while it was off air.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, and I remember sitting down with them and putting in my VHS. They wanted to watch Star Trek. I would put in my VHS Survival. Right. And I remember sitting there with them, and I was thinking, they'll be all right, they'll get it. And at the time, they laughed at it. They were like, "Oh, the effects are really bad. This is ridiculous." And I was like, "I'll make them pay in some form down the road. I'll get my revenge on them." But years later, they've watched it back now and they actually enjoy it.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and then they're not big Doctor Who fans in many ways. They kind of watched the new series that came about, but they said, "Oh, I actually like that more than I'd like this episode or that episode from the new era.
Yeah.
So I think there's a new appreciation for the original run now than there. You know, I think in 2005, the new era, it was fresh, wasn't it? And you know, that was the new kid on the block. And I think now people are appreciating the original run a lot more than probably did 2005 upwards. And you know, my view as well is, you know, the show the other day about Sylvester, you know, fantastic Seventh Doctor. But at the time when that show ended, Sylvester in a certain corners was treated almost like the low budget Doctor. And there were always a few jokes about him, but I loved him from the word go. You know, I can still sit there and enjoy a Sylvester story. You know, he's just fantastic. You know, and you know, hopefully we get to see him at conventions for many years to come.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. I'm really pleased that you enjoyed our Sylvester special when it turned in 80. Yeah, I'm really pleased you enjoyed that. I mean, the brilliant thing about we're seeing this with the recent Blu-ray collections, aren't we? And the season Blu-ray editions, because you know they are continually, they go straight to #1, John.
Yeah,
you know, on pre-order alone.
And you know, we've said many a time, haven't we, us fans, that we're spoiled with those collections, because I can't think of any other show around the world that gets this much love put into it.
No.
And I think, that those collections are special. But I think fans are new fans are coming onto it. I don't know, you know, is it the new effects that they're adding in that are starting to make it more accessible to younger generations? But they're just good stories, in my opinion.
Totally.
It's great. So keep them coming.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I've often said, as you'll know from the review shows and stuff I've said to you, I don't think, leaving the effects aside and the fact that it was all done on a very minuscule budget, as we all know, when you look at the original series run from 63 to 89, the stories are superb, and they are stories. They take you to beginning to middle to end. And that is what a lot of people need to remember about a story. If you want something that's going to stand the test of time, surely you have to put a story out there so that no matter what age you are, you can follow the narrative.
Yeah. And there is still part of me, though, that wishes I could go back to that VHS release era, because that was a special time for me. It really was. I mean, my parents came in one day, and the first VHS stories they brought home together was Death to the Daleks, Robots of Death, and they were phenomenal. They were watched back to back, and that was my first introduction to Tom Baker and John Pertwee. And I remember watching Death to the Daleks, and I was like, John Pertwee, bloody, he's fantastic, he is. And then I put Robots of Death in, and I'm like, flipping hell, we've gone up a level here, haven't we? What am I going to do?
Wow.
And that was it. But, you know, for me, I think that VHS run, my favourite, is probably going to be a mix of probably the Genesis of the Daleks release with the Sontaran experiment.
That's right,
with that cover. Then that double VHS pack was fantastic.
Yeah. That was a cover by Andrew Skillety. Remember, it really stood out on the shelves.
Special.
You know, because what they used to remember when they would come out, I used to go to places like Our Price, W.H. Smith, John Menzies, but in Our Price especially, because it was music as well. At the door, they'd have that day's releases.
Yeah.
And I always remember the Doctor Who ones, but the Genesis of the Daleks Sontaran experiment one really went bang, because it was red and it was yellow and it was pop. Yeah, right at the front door. I remember it in Our Price going, there it is.
And I'll tell you a story about that from me, about how wonderful our mums are, right?
Go on.
My mum and dad, they bought me that set for Christmas back in, that would have been what, 91-ish, something like that.
Oh, something like that.
But a few months prior to that, a mate of mine got it for his birthday, and he lent it to me. And I was watching Genesis, and our VHS recorder chewed up the tape.
Oh no, nightmare.
And I was like, oh no. Mum, crafty as ever, took it back to WH Smith's and said, this is a faulty cassette tape. Got a refund on it. Everything was okay. So
brilliant.
Mum to the rescue on that one.
And your mum was brilliant. What quick thinking there. So your friend was happy.
She's never let me live it down, to be honest.
Well, that's what mothers do.
Yeah. Can I use your car? No. Well, remember that VHS set from '93?
That was the problem with the VHSs, though, wasn't it? I mean, that could happen occasionally. Fortunately, I don't remember anything like that happening to my bought VHSs because I would have been quite miffed. But I do remember them with certain ones, when I'd recorded stuff from the telly. I mean, did you do that as well? Were you? Or are you a little bit older for recording stuff off TV?
I was doing it off UK Gold.
That's a bit older, yeah.
yeah. So I was doing it on Sunday Omnibus, but yeah, that was just a bit before me, I would say. But because what was it? When VHSs came in, mid '80s?
Well, yeah. I mean, of course, the big one was they started with What Do the Fans Want at Longleat in '83.
Yeah.
And then they started coming through on the budget range. I remember going to, I saw the poster, John. I remember seeing this poster or advert really in a magazine because they started with several BBC ones, and Revenge of the Cybermen, of course, was the one, and it was $9.99. So this was affordable. This was really sort of, you've got to have it. And I remember going to Woolworths and just being thrilled because the whole top shelf was Revenge of the Cybermen.
Fantastic.
And then, I mean, it's strange because the VHS range took 20 years to release all of Doctor Who. Yeah. And then the DVD range started in '99 with the 5 Doctors, but they did the same pattern. They released about 5 different genres of BBC shows, one being Doctor Who, and of course that went sky high. So that appeared shortly after with the series we now know. But it's funny how you remember these things, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember, my parents would always take me to Longleat, not to go and see the animals. It was always to go to the Doctor Who exhibition. and I remember in what would have been about '85.
Yeah.
They got me the TARDIS tent. Do you remember the TARDIS tent?
I've got it over there.
Oh, have you got? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I was that was my favourite thing. But I remember I said, right, let's go to Longleat and let's face these monsters. And I thought, I'll be doctorish. I'll go in, I'll face the monsters.
Yeah.
2 minutes in, dragged out of there, kicking and screaming, crying my eyes out.
Who scared you?
Back there, but I did get to pick something up at the shop afterwards, so I was okay.
Who scared you? What scared you then? Come on.
For me, it was always the Cybermen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Fab.
And when you had a brother that used to press the button to make it move to make you scared even more. That was difficult. But Cybermen was a big thing for me. And funnily enough, the Tractators.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know, because it might have been just as I was coming into, I was getting old enough to remember Colin, but I remember from Davison, that might have been one of my early images.
Probably, yeah.
But one of my first memories of Colin, really remembering it, was Cybermen having their heads cut off.
Yeah. In Attack of the Cybermen, yeah. I suppose when you're quite small, that is quite scary, and I can understand why the Tractators would get a wee kid there as well.
Yeah, and never gone near snails or anything like that again.
That's why you don't garden.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. She's not doing it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, it's good. I mean, did you manage to get all the VHSs then?
Yeah, I managed to get all the VHSs. Another 2 of my favourites was, probably you would have had them as well, was the Remembrance and Chase tin from '93 set.
Yeah.
Trial of a Time Lord.
Yeah, the police box tin
collection, didn't they? And they did Attack of the Cybermen and one of the others. Yeah, they were great.
And Planet.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But they were, that run was great. And then I thought, oh, what do I do now? It's all ended. And then next thing you know, we're off again.
The DVDs.
Yeah,
and you go all over again.
Exactly. Yeah, it never
And
ends.
now we're doing it all over again, John.
It's going to be virtual reality one day, isn't it?
That might be a step too far for me, I tell you. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you when you look at that, I'm always saying, I'm not doing it again because I have done all the VHSs 20 years. Then I did 20 years of collecting all the DVDs.
DNA, isn't it?
Yeah, then you had the new series that came in with the DVDs first, and then that switched to Blu-ray. Then it switched to season box sets. So you can see, you can actually chronicle how they tell us, times are changing because you go from individuals to suddenly box sets are coming out, and that's all the range, and you don't get the individual stories anymore. So you've got all that, and goodness knows what's going to happen around the in the next the forthcoming years. But you've got all this sort of stuff, and you look at that. And then you look at the Blu-rays, and now, of course, we've got the possibility of we've got the animations that are there, and we've even got the possibility now of coloured stories from the '60s. I mean, is that something? Are you getting the animations? Would you be interested in the coloured stuff?
I mean, I've got the animations and I've got the coloured versions of it. I don't know. Some of them have been a bit hit and miss for me. I think the missing episode on Web of Fear. Let's not talk about that one too much because that was awful.
Yeah.
But I like the fact they're trying it. But I think the latest thing I've read is not just for Doctor Who, but for other shows. They're talking about artificial intelligence now, aren't they? About using that to, take images and try and recreate it. But we'll just have to see. But
yeah, I think it'd be quite weird. I mean, surely there's legal implications there as well from the families of the people that are either around or not around now. I mean,
because isn't it Disney now or something? They're having to get people like Harrison Ford to actually sign contracts to say that they can use them.
Well, good luck for that. Can you actually see him signing anything? Like, he'll tell them what to do. Right? I love Harrison Ford. He'll just say, "Oh, bugger off."
So good luck trying to get Tom to do that.
Well, I don't know. I think the case for the animations is brilliant if the animation is presented correctly and if it's done to a really, really good standard. I mean, you look at some of the animations that are around right now, and they're gorgeous.
Oh, they are.
And I just don't see why we haven't been given that sort of. If you're not gonna spend money on something, don't do it.
Yeah, and also I don't like the whole. Let's change the look of the characters to fit modern times. It's if you're embarrassed by it, then don't do it.
Or get somebody else to do it who doesn't care.
Exactly.
Be respectful to your source.
Yeah, exactly right. But I mean, for me, it's like with the DVDs coming in, it took me longer to get into the extras.
What do you mean?
You've got, because when they started releasing DVDs with the extras on, I just had my VHS head on, so I would literally just go.
Just the episode, you mean?
Yeah, just watching the episodes. So I had all these extras that it took me a few years before I thought, actually, I'm going to go and watch the extras now. But now it's like second nature, isn't it? Because it's like I'll get the collection through and I'll put the extras on. Yeah. Then I'll watch the story.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Well, I mean, that was the whole point, John. You might be too young to remember, but I remember when the DVDs came along and a lot of people were going, what's this? Because we all had massive VHS collections. We all had VHS. I mean, see them all in charity shops now all over the country. You see people with VHS. Now you're starting to see it being joined by DVD. Nobody wants any of them now. But, the DVDs came in, and one of the big features to get us all to move from VHS to DVDs was behind the scenes features and making of documentaries and commentaries by the stars of this film or television show. It was weird, but that's how they got us to do it. And I think that was part of the reason, because when they first came out, the Blu-ray players were still in the £400-500.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can get one for 20 quid now.
Yeah. And I think, like, growing up, we're from that time when you didn't have extras like that. You watched it, that was the end of it. You might meet them at a con and ask them a few questions, but you didn't get much about behind the scenes, like after it was broadcast. That was kind of it, wasn't it? Really,
it was. Yeah.
Great times.
Well, they were. I mean, it must have been a gift in a sense to all the cast and production crews of all this sort of stuff, because they suddenly had to start remembering things that happened a few years before.
Their memories.
Yeah, I love it when you actually see them now on some of it when they're watching the episodes.
Yeah.
And I know they're all edited, so we get the bits and pieces. But I like to think that they're watching it, going, unless you're a few of them who aren't obviously watching it because they can't tell what's going on the story because they're too busy talking.
Yeah.
No, if you'd watched that bit, you would have known why they've done that.
Because there's some actors that will not watch their programs or their movies, isn't it? And I'm sure, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Tom Baker was.
He was like that for a long time. Yeah. He's obviously got over that now as he's seeing his younger self. But isn't it lovely when you see Tom especially enjoying he's so engrossed with them, you know. He really gets into it, doesn't he? He's like, oh, and he might not remember any of it, but he goes with the story. This is good. This is good. You don't get much whippet shit with him.
And I know they said, behind the scenes he was controversial and whatnot with what went on, but for me, that shows his passion. And also just the way he used to act in front of kids.
Oh, magical.
And, wouldn't smoke in front of kids. The famous story of turning up at someone's house because he was late back. It's fantastic, But we've been spoiled, haven't we?
Oh, totally. I mean, we lived through some really good times. I mean, for myself, obviously, as a kid, growing up in the 70s, with some memories of John, but certainly taking off from Tom's first series. I remember everything from that. It's all, oh goodness me, and Liz's performance as well as Tom's, and it's all in there. It's so magical. And then we got through the 80s. Amazing.
That's fantastic. Something just popped up earlier today, and it was a couple of pictures of John Pertwee in costume as the Third Doctor. I don't know if you've seen it, but he's walking along in Bristol.
Oh, really?
And it was when he was doing the Ultimate Adventure.
Oh, of course.
That's the show I went to.
Right.
So because I lived in Bristol at the time, so I went to that show, and I'm thinking, flipping heck, I'd forgotten it was John Pertwee. It wasn't Colin Baker because it just comes flooding back. But he was, where I used to walk every day. There he is, fantastic. Bless him.
Do you remember the show?
I do remember the show. I know Big Finish tried to do something on it a few years ago.
This is an audio, which was very brave.
I don't remember all the details. I remember the Cybermen, the Daleks, and then they had the little dog creature.
Zog. Hey, do you know Zog is actually in the Who Shops Museum?
Is it really?
Yeah, you can go in and see Zog.
I booked my ticket for the weekend. To the reunion. But they were doing things like that. Again, I know probably John Nathan Turner gets a lot of grief, but he was trying it, wasn't he, with a panto and whatnot. And you look back now and you think, well, he was trying to promote the show in different ways that was thinking outside of the box, that people would be envious to have someone with that kind of imagination to try different things now. Disney could do with it.
Well, John was ahead of his time. On a lot of things, especially with understanding the beast that Doctor Who was, and how to present it, how to look at marketing. He wanted to try and do different things, but he was always, to an extent, a lot of times, I think he was restrained a lot about what could be done at the time. But he sort of, he established a marketplace really for Doctor Who, which was then worked through the wilderness years and was more or less ready to welcome the show back. I mean, it was the likes of all of us that were saying, right, we're going to support this show. When it came back in 2005, we're going to be there. We're going to support this, and we're going to bring all our friends with. And by God, we did. Do you remember?
Yeah, without doubt. And I still remember though the TV movie, and what was it got here? It's 9 million, something like that.
Yeah, something around that. Yeah.
And so it showed the British public still loved Doctor Who. And I think if it had been a UK production, we probably would have had a series then. But of course, BBC weren't committed to spend that kind of money on that type of show at the time, were they?
But the BBC always had it in their head, as they still do today, that Doctor Who had to be a huge, big budget show. I still don't understand quite why. I mean, they went through 26 years of giving it 50 quid and saying, get 26 episodes out of that. I mean, and it held its own,
Yeah, it's all about script. If the script's good, people are tuning in.
And the actors understand a good script, the directors understand a good script, and they put their heart into it, don't they? And they produce it.
You look at it now, you look at all these shows and movies now, and they've got multi-million-pound budgets for FX and stuff, but there's no story, so people don't like them.
Yeah, I was reading about that the other day. I don't know if I told you, but I was reading about this, and I couldn't believe one episode of I don't know what it's called because it doesn't interest me. The Lord of the Rings TV show.
Oh yeah,
and I read how much an episode.
Yeah.
What? And then I see clips on it on YouTube, and I go, well, you can't see that they've spent this amount of millions of dollars per episode. And then I hear, you hear people and you read things where people have come back saying there's no story to it. What are they doing?
Yeah, I know. And I just want it simpler, to go back to simpler times where you've got, someone of the writing ability of Terrence Dicks. They were never going to get that. Just to flesh out a decent story with a great script or a Robert Holmes type style.
There's another name,
and that will engage people. I hope the new series is good. I really do, but I just hope there's more of a story, a script. A tight script, as opposed to, wham bam, let's run here to there. That's the end of the story. On to next week.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
I know totally what you mean, because I've criticised this from the modern version of Doctor Who, the reboot, if you like, a lot, because with the original Doctor Who 63 to 89, you got that development of a story, and whether or not you like the story or not, it was a story, beginning, middle, and end. Whereas I do think now that because they're under the impression that they have to have everything done within 45 minutes to 50 minutes or whatever it's going to be, I personally think it loses sometimes the gravitas of an actual story, because it's bang, 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 bang. Yeah. So I think I know what you mean there. Yeah.
So but I can't believe how quiet it is on the 60th year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually. At the time that we're doing this, it is 2023, Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year. You know as well as we on Who's Views, we've been celebrating 60 years with lots of reviews of the previous shows, and we've got lots of fabulous stuff. And you're one of our big contributors, which is great. But I've called this year a damp squid.
Yeah, I would say the same. I remember in 2013, I remember Moffat saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to take over telly," and we didn't take over telly, did we? Really? I mean, there were some nice shows that came out in 2013, but
were there?
Not really.
What do you remember? I mean, you got the Day of the Doctor, you got the Adventures in Time and Space thing. You got the 5-ish Doctors, which I remember right was on the red button.
Yeah.
The Night of the Doctor insert, which only fans would have seen. But only fans would have seen that because it was on red button, wasn't it, John?
I mean, for me personally, that was great. Just seeing McGann. I was happy at that point, just because that beginning bit where he goes, "I'm a doctor," but probably not the one that you were expecting.
Yeah, clever line.
I came home for lunch from work that day, and something popped up, and I thought, "What's this?" I red buttoned it, and this episode started playing. I was like, "What? What's going on here?" Like that. I thought, flipping it, it's an episode, is it? And he turned up, and literally, I went back to work that afternoon. They didn't get any work out of me that afternoon. that was because I thought, where do I go from here? I've peaked.
That was it for you. That was the 50th done.
On TV since '96. I'm okay. I've done what I need to do now.
That's funny. Oh no! I hope your bosses aren't watching.
Yeah. P45 tomorrow morning.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, but I don't know. I keep saying, and you would have seen this in our shows. I reckon 83 and 93 were better years than this one because things happened in those years all through the year. Whereas this year, what we've got so far is just, well, nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't been, John, if it hadn't been for the likes of people like Telos Publishing and 10 Alps,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have got anything at all, because even this year the Blu-rays have disappeared. Okay, we've had season 20 announced, but usually we would have had several by now. We haven't had any standard editions at this time of when we're doing this.
No.
The merchandise has been quite lack. We've got that I've got that wishy-washy thing that nobody's interested in, the Doomsday thing. Please.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere near that.
Well, I don't think anybody is.
No.
I don't care how much they're pushing it. Nobody seems to be interested at all.
But I think the trouble they had with that is that they didn't have a compelling person to play that role, and the story didn't sound strong at all. And then when they pushed it, it was like, well, no one's remotely interested in this at all. But you're almost trying to insult the fans by some of the comments that you're saying online. And it's like,
well, let's face it, she didn't try. She actually did.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. And I think I've read online that it's a big thing in Hollywood now. They call it hate marketing. And apparently
they call it what?
Hate marketing. And apparently it's one of the new things where it's like, if you insult fans, basically online, you'll start getting the clicks because people will react to it.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
A trend. And you know, it's been a big thing with things like Star Wars and Marvel and DC. And I've sadly, I get a feeling that might be coming across here in the UK a bit more.
Why on earth would they do something so ridiculous? Because all you're doing there is alienating your audience. You're not bringing them on board, and they're not going to watch your stuff if they don't want it or buy your stuff. And that's been shown, hasn't it, John, over the last several years now, time and time again. I mean, look at box offices are down because the films, they're not going to support the films. That means they won't buy the Blu-rays or the 4Ks. They won't buy any of the books. They won't buy any of the CDs. We have seen this with our show as well, with our beloved Time Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, why would they do something like that?
And the thing is with Doctor Who fans, I would say that every Doctor Who fan I've ever met, I've got on with, I've had no problem with, lovely people. And I think the one thing that we've got is a passion. We've got a passion for the show that we've loved since we were little. Everybody's, bar the Wilderness Years, has got their own Doctor for their generation. And, you know, it's something that everybody loves. But the trouble is, sometimes I think there are people outside of it that like to stir the red ants up with the black ants just to try and create something that isn't there. And I think it needs to just get back to, let's tell good stories, you know. Let's get children interested in this fantastic show, these wonderful adventures that you go on with the Doctor every week. Once you get back to that, it's going to be a knockout success again. It's been proven again and again, isn't it?
Well, yeah, totally. I mean, we had 26 years of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Continually, you know, and people forget that in those days it was on from 63 to 89. It was on every year, no breaks, so that people could, you know, have a little holiday or a little production break or go off and do something. None of that. It was every single year for 24 to 26 years for the majority of its run. Every year, commitment from everybody, because that's how it was, and people forget that. So you know, the original run is amazing because people came back to it every year for 26 years.
And for me, I don't look at it as eras anymore. I class it as pre-hair and post-hair.
Oh, so your hair disappeared in the Wilderness Years, did it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm still looking for it. You know,
listen, mate, I hate to tell you this, but you're probably never going to find it. You know. So what you're saying there, then, I'm going to ask you now for the future of the show.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying you would like a return to the story element of this, proper damn good stories that are engaging and get people involved in the show. What else are your hopes for Doctor Who from its 60th in November onwards?
I hope that the politics are dialed down a bit, or the writing is intelligent enough to insert the politics, but do it in a subtle way. It's been done before in the history of the show, where you can tell a compelling story about, you know, political debates and whatnot, but it's very subtly drawn into the story.
Or set on an alien planet.
Yeah, exactly. But the last few years, I think that has been, let's focus on that as the primary reason for the story, and then the script and everything else is kind of the secondary element of it.
Right.
So I hope that changes. But I just hope that it's just a knockout show. Everybody loves it, and we start getting back to some wonderful times like we have had. You know, Russell T Davies, when it came back, you know, Dalek, when I sat there watching Dalek, and I was, you know, I was going into work the next day, and people who weren't even Doctor Who fans were talking about Dalek.
Yeah, yeah.
And how good was that? How good was that? You know, and you know, when you had episodes like the Satan Pit, you know, and you know, the Impossible Planet, there were stories like that which were great. So it can be done, and it's just let's work on the scripts. Let's not talk about spin-off.
Oh,
let's get the first show right. Make sure that's a knockout hit. Then we can talk spin-offs.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I've said that to other people many times. I'm not interested in the spin-offs. I'm more concerned about getting the main show, Doctor Who, back to where it was. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned a few episodes there. I mean, yeah, you know, that Dalek episode written by Rob Sherman back in 2005 when that was broadcast. You're right. And that was still a culture shock. I don't know if you had the same thing, but I was still in a culture shock because people were coming up to me after the Saturday saying, "Oh, I saw Doctor Who on Saturday," because they knew I was a fan. Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. I mean, do you think it was purely the stories that got the general public involved in the show then?
I think we got lucky by the fact that we had Christopher Eccleston at the time that had that gravitas about him to carry that show.
Yeah.
I think he was fantastic, and you know, all credit to him for doing what he did. And I'll give huge credit to Billie Piper as well. I remember when she got announced, and I think it was in the papers or it was in Doctor Who magazine. It was somewhere where they said, "Oh no, we're going back to the silliness of the late '80s." Where it was
there was a lot of that.
You know, and it was like, you know, where they were talking about when Paul Daniels was linked to be the next Doctor in the papers and things like that. That's how bad it had got.
Well, it had, yeah.
And they kind of said, "Oh no, she's a singer. Oh, this is going to be terrible." But she was fantastic. And you know, credit to him, Russell T Davies. He knew how to bring it back. You know, there are things with that era that I don't necessarily like, but the way we did some of these stories are superb. I think just that Dalek story for me, though, is
that one of your favorites, John?
I do love it. I do, and I have to say, I do love the parting of the ways. I think that's fantastic. And
do you remember that week? Do you remember that week in the United Kingdom? That whole week between but also, yeah, I mean, it's just that the whole. Everybody seemed to. I was actually that week, and then a few years later in 2008, where we got the week between Still on Earth and Journeys Out. Those are the 2 weeks where I actually began to get fed up of being a Doctor Who fan. Because people were coming up with, "Oh, we saw this. What's going to happen? What was that? I don't know."
I'm not really a time traveler.
It was intense, though. Do you remember? Because everybody seemed to have seen those episodes, those 4 especially. You know, and it was just chronic. And because people by that point as well knew that Eccleston was going, you know, and towards the end of that week, I could say, well, he's going to die.
Yeah.
Because I was getting so sort of like fed up with people. Do you know what's going to happen? Yeah, he's going to die. What?
Yeah.
And he did.
And you know, you probably remember this as well, but when it was coming back on the broadcast day for Rose, I remember them. It was pretty much for several hours prior to Rose, they did a whole show of just each Doctor, and they were talking about each Doctor, and I thought that was brilliant. How they were, for new audiences, they were saying, right, this is Doctor Who, this is Doctor number 1, and they did that all the way up to broadcast of Rose. It was great.
And it was needed as well, because although there would have been certain age groups that knew what Doctor Who was, you did have to open it out to the new viewers, which they did brilliantly. But you also had that element that when we all sat down and watched that, and as you went through the stories, you knew it did seem familiar to an extent, but it was different.
Yeah,
there was that sort of element to it, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was, and for me, I kind of tried to put that to the back of my head, and I was thinking, oh, maybe it's because of it's a modern take on it now. We had 96, but really it was 89 where I'd last seen Doctor Who on telly. So TV had changed quite a bit. So I kind of tried to put that out of my head and just go, it's Doctor Who, it's back. Let's crack on. I've got my Saturday nights back.
Yeah, well, I remember phoning a friend of mine after that Rose episode, another Doctor Who fan like us, and we just chatted for about an hour about that episode. And I remember, as we were saying goodbye on the phone, remember, this is old-fashioned phones, this is all landlines and all this sort of stuff. I remember saying, right, but isn't it amazing? We get to do it again next Saturday.
Yeah. And do you know what? I'll tell you this as well. A week after, it was a Friday night, and I'd been invited to go to, it was a town called Wimborne, and it's like a public, nice town. You probably know it. And it's a lovely place. And I was walking through Wimborne, and coming the other way is this guy dressed up as Tom Baker, as the 4th Doctor.
What?
A week into the new show. And when I said to you earlier about this feels like a fever dream, I'm a week into the show coming back, and I stopped this guy, and he goes, "Oh, that episode last week, never watched Doctor Who before, loved it." And he literally borrowed a friend of his Doctor Who stories, and he loved Tom Baker.
Wow.
So he was off to a party, and he bought himself in the week a full outfit for the 4th Doctor. So he's walking past me with the full scarf and everything on.
Amazing.
And thinking, I've slipped into some sort of Twilight Zone alternative reality or something,
Well, yeah, you'd had one too many already.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, getting thrown out of a pub.
Yeah,
jelly
we only saw. I mean, that shows you how it changed, because we only saw, and even then in the 90s, we saw some people dressing up.
Yeah,
and that's become big business in the intervening years. Obviously, now, I mean, we know them as cosplayers now, and they're everywhere. And a load of people do it now. I mean, I've seen pictures of people going on the bus dressed as something. But it didn't really happen in the 90s. And as I say, because you got a small amounts, that's the only place you ever saw people with these incredible costumes they were wearing.
Well, it's like your show about the tribute to Sylvester McCoy on Sunday night, and you put that clip up of a Comic-Con, and on the banner is the 7th Doctor.
Yes.
That's fantastic, because when I used to go to cons in the 90s, I'll be honest, if it wasn't a Doctor Who con, you'd see people dressed as Doctor Who, but 99% of it was dressed as Tom, was dressed as the 4th Doctor.
Yeah.
The ones that I would go to. I didn't see anyone dressed as the 7th Doctor, the 6th Doctor. I would see a few dressed as the 5th Doctor, but it's changed now. You go to a con, you can see about 15 7 Doctors walking past you.
Well, it's true. That's absolutely true, and that's lovely. And I love the fact, those Doctors as well from the original series are represented in that way, because you do see more 7th Doctors. You see a lot of 6th Doctors, and I think that's probably because his costume is like, I'm going to say it's gorgeous. I mean, it's full of textures and colors, and it's lovely to dress up like that, isn't it? It does say something.
Yeah, it's it is great. And of course, I think people are I think they're enjoying the earlier shows now, but they're also, I think people are changing between the doctors they love now. Because, you know, I find that with people where some people will go, oh, I love the third Doctor. And then 6 months later, oh, I love the fourth Doctor now.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the beauty of it. You can pick and mix what you know, who's your favourite, depending on where you are in your life at that time. But
it's like when we were all growing up, when Doctor Who was on the air then, you know, I vaguely remember Pertwee, changed my allegiance immediately to Tom Baker, you know, and grew up with Tom. 7 years in, Peter comes along. Oh, okay. And one of the actors, I can't remember, one of the actors, I said this in a nice way. He said that actually we're all quite fickle, because several weeks into the new one, you're still there with the new one. And it's absolutely true, you know, and there's very rare cases where you don't take to another incumbent coming into the role. It is quite rare.
Yeah.
And you know, it bodes well for any new actor coming into the show, you know?
Yeah. And for me, you know, is Tom.
Yeah.
The fourth Doctor. I you know, as soon as I got that first VHS of Robots of Death, that was it. He just nailed it for me. And I was like, right, you know, right, back out that front door, Mum and Dad. You're not having tea now. You go and get me the rest of Tom's.
And yeah, it was the only one available at that point, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They would have trudged down to Woolies or wherever and said, sorry, son, none of us yet.
and you know, you know, it's nice. It's nice that also he gets that love back from the fans, because when you see him, he genuinely does look quite touched by it, doesn't he? You know, how much everybody loves him.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, he just knocked it out of the park, didn't he? He was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to tell you. You know how much I love Tom's Doctor, and because, you know, I was there at the time, of course, like so many of us were. We were growing up with him. I mean, I can't remember a Saturday night when Tom's Doctor, and because it was the 70s. I mean, I said it. The 70s was a golden age for the Doctor. You had the exhibitions going on. You had you had a good number of merchandise things around. I mean, I've been transfers, the Electroset transfers. I remember particularly. Saw them when we were on holiday in the Isle of Man, because nobody went abroad in those days. The Isle of Man's where you went to, John.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it in a toy shop, this red thing, because they had loads of transfers back in the 70s, and the red one with Tom's face on it and the Doctor Who logo, and I had to have it. You know, and opening it out and doing the transfers, and then you had certain other things. You had the Genesis of the Daleks final, which I think we all had and wore to death, because you just constantly played it. You know, no, you weren't allowed to play ABBA. It's Genesis of the Daleks.
Yeah. and I think also it's like, you know, you were there when the fourth Doctor regenerated. You know, I watched it on that VHS release, and you know, I was gutted. Fantastic, but then, you know, Peter came along. I love Peter. You know, the energy of him and the way he goes out in Caves of Androzani.
Totally different, isn't he?
You know, that ending is phenomenal. Yeah. But 89, I went on holiday with my family to the south of France. In the local bar, Doctor Who pinball machine.
Yes.
Did you ever see them?
I saw them. Yeah, well, I was slightly older than you, but they were in the pubs I would go into. I loved it. Spent far too much money on those stupid things, though, I have to tell you.
France, and there's a Doctor Who pinball machine.
But they went everywhere. They were totally brilliant, you know. And there was one pub we had to go into at least on a Friday or a Saturday, just so I could have a go on the pinball machine, the Doctor Who pinball. You know, gorgeous machines they were, and Sylve in the middle of all the Doctors at the top.
Yeah. You know, and then, you know, early 90s as well, with my computer just going into Southampton to buy Dalek Attack for my Amiga.
Dalek Attack.
Do you remember that? Not anymore, sadly. But yeah, that was basic. That's great. It's like a Doctor Who game. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, revolutionary. And now they drop them every now and then. I'm sure there's more planned for next year, I'll tell you.
Yeah, more than likely.
Yeah. We're gonna have to see, aren't we? Really, we're gonna have to see what happens with next year, and you have to come back on and chat again about, you know, what you've thought about the November specials and some of the. We're obviously Shooty makes his debut Christmas 2023, and then we're up and off into next year. Merchandise.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and it's great that you've come on for a little chit chat with me, and it's lovely to see you. But definitely, we'll have to get you back on again at some point to have a go. But thank you, thanks for coming on. No, listen, thank you. It's always great to have a chit chat with other fans and stuff, as we've done here, and really great to talk to you.
Yeah,
and we will definitely see you again soon. For you watching us on the channel, thank you so much for joining John and myself for this edition of Chit Chat. Please like the video, put your comments below and any comments you've got for us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we've got lots of great content on the way, and already some good content for you there as well to have a look at. So stay with us. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining John and myself. See you next time.